Chapter 1. The blood test that ended my marriage. My name's Marcus Thompson. I'm 41 years old, and I own a mid-sized construction company called Thompson & Sons Building in Charlotte, North Carolina. Ironic name now, considering what I'm about to tell you. I built that company from nothing. Started as a framing carpenter right out of high school, worked my way up, got my contractor's license at 26, and opened my own shop at 30. By the time this story begins, I had 23 employees, a fleet of trucks, and contracts all over Mecklenburg County. I was living the American dream, or so I thought. Nice house in the Ballantyne area, 3 beautiful kids, a wife I'd been with since college, and a best friend I'd known since we were 19 years old playing pickup basketball at the YMCA. Everything I believed about my life was a lie, and I found out because of a sprained ankle. It was a Thursday afternoon in September when I took my 13-year-old son Ethan to the orthopedic clinic over on Randolph Road. He'd twisted his ankle pretty bad during soccer practice the day before, came down wrong on a defender's foot, and heard something pop. The swelling was gnarly, and his coach was worried it might be more than a simple sprain. The doctor, young guy, maybe 35, seemed competent, did his examination, and said Ethan might need a minor surgical procedure to repair some ligament damage. Nothing too serious, but they need to do some pre-op blood work just to be safe. Standard stuff, he said. We'll need to type his blood, the doctor explained, filling out some paperwork. Just routine. Do you happen to know your blood type and your wife's? Sometimes it helps us anticipate any potential complications. I nodded. Sure. I'm O negative. Universal donor. They tell me every time I give blood at the Red Cross. My wife, Vanessa, is A positive. The doctor's pen stopped moving. He looked up at me with this expression I couldn't quite read. Confusion, maybe concern. Then he glanced at the chart in his hand, and I watched his face change. Mr. Thompson, he said slowly, there might be a mix-up somewhere. According to the blood work we just ran, Ethan is AB positive. I shrugged. Okay, is that a problem for procedure? He hesitated. No, it's not a problem for the procedure. It's just... He set down his pen and looked at me with something that felt uncomfortably close to pity. Mr. Thompson, are you certain about your blood type? Positive. I've donated blood probably 50 times. O negative every single time. The doctor took a breath. Sir, I don't want to overstep here, but basic genetics. If you're O negative and your wife is A positive, it's not possible for your biological child to be AB positive. The AB blood type requires one A gene and one B gene from the parents. Neither you nor your wife could provide AB gene. I remember staring at him like he was speaking another language. My brain just couldn't process what he was telling me. So there's been a mistake. I said, maybe the lab screwed up Ethan's sample. It's possible, he said carefully, but his tone suggested he didn't believe that. You might want to verify things, just to be certain. I don't remember much about the rest of that appointment. I know Ethan got fitted for a walking boot. I know I paid the copay. I know I drove us home while my son complained about missing soccer for 6 weeks. But inside my head, there was nothing but static and a single question repeating over and over. What the hell just happened? That night, I couldn't sleep. Vanessa was next to me in bed, scrolling through her phone like everything was normal, and I kept staring at the ceiling trying to convince myself there was a reasonable explanation. Lab error. Some weird genetic mutation. Anything except what that doctor's face had suggested. But I couldn't let it go. The next morning, after Vanessa left for her part-time job at the interior design firm and the kids were at school, I went online and ordered 3 at-home DNA paternity test kits from 3 different companies. I paid for expedited shipping and rush processing. If this was going to destroy my life, I needed to know for certain, and I needed proof that couldn't be disputed. When the kits arrived 3 days later, I felt like a criminal in my own home. I waited until Saturday morning when everyone was still asleep, and I crept into each of my children's rooms with cotton swabs and collection vials. Ethan first, 13 years old, my firstborn, the kid I taught to throw a football and ride a bike. Then Olivia, 11, my princess who had me wrapped around her little finger since the day she was born. And finally Maya, just 6 years old, still young enough to crawl into our bed during thunderstorms. I swabbed inside of their cheeks while they slept, feeling like the worst father in the world for even questioning whether they were mine. These were my kids. I'd held them in the delivery room, cut their umbilical cords, walked the floors with them during colicky nights. The idea that they might not be biologically connected to me felt impossible. I mailed all 3 kits to 3 different laboratories that same afternoon. Then I waited 2 weeks, 14 days of absolute torture, 14 days of looking at my children's faces and searching for my own features, 14 days of watching Vanessa cook dinner and laugh at TV shows and kiss me goodnight while I wondered if our entire marriage was a lie, 14 days of pretending everything was fine while my guts were being slowly fed through a wood chipper. I threw myself into work, took on extra projects, stayed late at job sites until my foreman asked if everything was okay at home. I couldn't tell him the truth, that I was terrified to go home because I might start screaming and never stop. The results came on a Wednesday. All 3 reports arrived the same day, which felt like the universe's sick idea of efficiency. I was sitting in my truck in the company parking lot during lunch, hands shaking so bad I could barely open the envelopes. I started with Ethan's results, figuring if any of them were mine, it would be my firstborn. Probability of paternity, 0%. The alleged father is excluded as the biological father of the tested child, 0%. Not unlikely, not improbable, 0. I open Olivia's results. Probability of paternity, 0%. Then Maya's. Probability of paternity, 0%. 3 children. 14 years of fatherhood, 0%. I sat in that truck for 2 hours. At some point I started crying. These horrible, ugly sobs that came from somewhere so deep I didn't even know existed. I beat my steering wheel until my hands were bruised. I screamed into the silence of that cab until my throat was raw. None of them were mine. Not one. And then, through the fog of devastation, my brain started doing math. Terrible, horrible math. Ethan was conceived 8 months after our wedding. I remember that time clearly because I was working double shifts, 60, 70 hours a week, trying to afford our first house. Vanessa's mom was sick, so she couldn't help out much. But Derek, my best friend Derek, he'd offer to help Vanessa get settled, to check on her when I was working late, to make sure she wasn't lonely. Derek, who was always around during those early years. Derek, who happened to be at every major family milestone. Derek, who my children called Uncle Derek, and who showed up to every birthday party, every holiday dinner, every backyard barbecue. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through old photos. Ethan at 5 years old, standing next to Derek at a 4th of July cookout. Olivia as a toddler, sitting on Derek's lap during Christmas. Maya's birth announcement, with Derek somehow in the hospital waiting room, even though I didn't remember inviting him. Then I looked at my children's faces. Really looked. Ethan had these green eyes that I'd always assumed came from Vanessa's side of the family. But Vanessa's eyes were brown. Mine were brown. Derek's eyes were green. Olivia had the specific dimple in her left cheek. I didn't have dimples. Vanessa didn't have dimples. But Derek had the exact same dimple in the exact same spot. And Maya's hair, this light auburn color that seemed to come from nowhere in our family tree. Derek's mother had auburn hair. I'd seen pictures. 22 years of friendship. 14 years of marriage. 3 children. My best friend hadn't just slept with my wife. He'd built an entire shadow family right in front of my face, and I'd been too blind and too trusting to see it. The man I trusted most in this world had been the architect of my destruction all along. I sat in that truck until the sun went down, and by the time I finally drove home, something inside me had fundamentally changed. The grief was still there, crushing and relentless. But underneath it, something else was growing, something cold and patient and utterly focused. I wasn't going to crumble. I wasn't going to run. I was going to get answers, all of them, and then I was going to make sure that everyone who participated in destroying my life paid the price. But first, I needed to hear from her own mouth. I needed to watch my wife explain how she'd stolen 14 years of my life and given my best friend a family that I paid for. That confrontation was coming, and I was going to be ready. Chapter 2. The confrontation when she finally admitted everything. I didn't confront Vanessa that night, or the next night, or even the next week. I know that sounds crazy. Most guys in my position would have stormed to the front door, thrown those DNA results in their wife's face, and burned the whole thing down right then and there. Part of me wanted to. God knows I wanted to. Every time she smiled at me, every time she said, "I love you" before bed, every time she kissed me goodbye in the morning, I felt this white-hot rage building in my chest that threatened to explode. But I'd spent 20 years in construction. I knew that demolition, without a plan, just creates a bigger mess. If I was going to tear down my marriage, I was going to do it strategically. I was going to make sure that when the dust settled, I was the one left standing. So I waited, and I planned. The Monday after I got those results, I took a long lunch and drove across town to meet with a divorce attorney named Patricia Holcomb. She'd been recommended by a buddy of mine who'd gone through a nasty split a few years back, and he described her as a pit bull in heels who'll rip your ex's throat out in court. That was exactly what I needed. I sat in her office for 2 hours, laying out everything, the blood test, the DNA results, my suspicions about Derek. Patricia listened without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad, her face unreadable. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and said, "Mr. Thompson, you're in a better position than most men who walk through my door. You have proof, you have documentation, and you haven't done anything stupid yet." Yet, I repeated, she almost smiled. The yet is important. From this moment forward, everything you do needs to be calculated. Don't confront her until you're ready. Don't tip off your friend. Don't move money. Don't change behaviors. Don't do anything that signals you know what you know. We need time to document assets, protect your business, and build a strategy. What about my kids? I asked. They're not biologically mine. Do I have any rights? Patricia's expression softened slightly. North Carolina recognizes something called psychological parentage. You've been their father for their entire lives. You're on their birth certificates. You supported them financially and emotionally. Biology isn't everything in family court, especially when the biological father has been hiding in the shadows while you did all the actual parenting. That gave me hope. More importantly, it gave me a reason to be patient. For the next 3 weeks, I played the role of clueless husband and devoted father. I went to work, came home, had dinner with my family, helped with homework, watched TV with Vanessa like nothing was wrong. Every night, I laid next to the woman who betrayed me for 15 years, and I didn't say a word. It was the hardest acting job of my life, but I used that time wisely. I documented everything: financial accounts, property records, Vanessa's work schedule, Derek's visits to our home. I screenshotted old social media posts showing Derek at family events. I pulled credit card statements and found charges I'd never questioned before. Hotels during girls' weekends, restaurants on nights she claimed to be working late, gifts I'd never seen. The evidence was everywhere. I just never thought to look. Finally, on a Saturday evening in early October, I was ready. I'd sent the kids to my mother's house for a sleepover with Grandma. Told Vanessa we deserved a quiet night alone, just the two of us. She seemed delighted. Even put on that sundress I always liked and lit some candles in the living room. I poured her a glass of that fancy Pinot Grigio she loved, the $12 bottle from Trader Joe's that she treated like it was fine wine. We sat on the couch, and she snuggled up against me, completely relaxed, completely unsuspecting. "This is nice," she said, sipping her wine. "We should do this more often. Just us." "Yeah," I said, "we should." Then I reached into my back pocket and pulled out the 3 DNA reports. I unfolded them slowly, deliberately, and placed them on the coffee table in front of her. "What's this?" she asked, still smiling. "Read them." I watched her face as she picked up the first page, watched the confusion flicker across her features as she processed the words. Watched the exact moment the color drained from her cheeks and her hands started trembling. Marcus, she whispered, keep reading. She flipped to the second report, then the third. By the time she finished, she looked like she might pass out. I can explain, she started. Can you? Because those reports say there's a 0% chance I'm the biological father of any of our children. All three of them. Vanessa, 0%. So please, explain that to me. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. For the first time in our 14-year marriage, my wife, the woman who always had an answer for everything, who could talk her way out of any situation, was completely and utterly speechless. It's not, she stammered. The test must be wrong. There has to be a mistake. I used 3 different labs, paid for rush processing, sent separate samples for each kid. I kept my voice calm, measured, even though everything inside me was screaming. There's no mistake, Vanessa. The only question is how long you're going to sit there lying to my face before you tell me the truth. The denial lasted maybe 45 seconds. I counted. Then her face crumpled and the tears started, and the words came pouring out in this pathetic flood of excuses and justifications. It wasn't supposed to happen, she sobbed. It started before we got married. Derek and I was scared, Marcus. I was young and scared, and you were working so much, and Derek was there, and it just happened. Just happened, I repeated. For 15 years? That's a hell of a long accident, Vanessa. I tried to stop it. So many times I tried. But I was already pregnant with Ethan when we got married, and I wasn't sure whose he was. And then it just kept going, and I didn't know how to tell you, and you were pregnant when we got married? I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. You walked down the aisle carrying another man's baby, and you didn't think that was something I should know? I didn't know for sure. I thought, I hoped. You hoped you could pass off Derek's kid as mine. And when that worked, you just kept doing it. 3 times. She couldn't even deny it. Just sat there crying, mascara running down her face, looking at me with these desperate eyes like she expected me to comfort her. Why? I asked. Help me understand why. I gave you everything. Vanessa, I worked 70-hour weeks to build that company so you could have the life you wanted. I was faithful to you for 15 years. I loved you. So why wasn't I enough? You were enough, she whimpered. I love you, Marcus. I've always loved you. Bullshit. It's true. Derek was different. He understood me in ways you didn't. We could talk about things, and he wasn't always stressed about work. And so I worked too hard. That's your excuse? I worked too hard to provide for my family, and that gave you permission to screw my best friend and let me raise his children? It wasn't like that. Then tell me what it was like. Vanessa, because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you and Derek have been running a con on me for 15 goddamn years. He gets to be a father without any of the responsibility. You get to have your side piece while I pay the bills, and I get to be the idiot who never figured it out. She reached for my hand. I pulled away like her touch burned. Don't you dare try to comfort me right now. What do you want to say? She cried. I made a mistake. A horrible, terrible mistake. But I chose you, Marcus. Every day, I chose to stay with you. That has to mean something. I stared at her for a long moment, letting those words sink in. You didn't choose me, Vanessa. You chose my money. You chose the house and the lifestyle and the stability. You chose to let me work myself half to death while you played house with Derek behind my back. That's not love. That's not even close to love. I stood up, couldn't stand to be near her anymore. Where are you going? She asked, panic rising in her voice. To have a conversation with Derek. And when I get back, we're going to talk about lawyers. Marcus, please. Save it. Whatever excuses you've got left, save them for the divorce proceedings. I'm done listening. I walked out my own house, got in my truck, and drove to O'Malley's, the sports bar where Derek and I have been watching games together for over a decade. I'd texted him earlier that day, told him to meet me there for the Panthers game. He'd responded with a thumbs-up emoji, completely oblivious. He was already at our usual booth when I walked in. 2 beers on the table, eyes on the big screen. When he saw me, he grinned and waved me over. Bro, you're late. First quarter's already. He stopped mid-sentence, probably seeing something in my face. You okay, man? You look rough. I slid into the booth across from him, looked at this man I'd known for 22 years, played basketball with, helped move into 3 different apartments, stood next to at his wedding, trusted with everything. How long? I asked quietly. How long what? How long have you been fucking my wife? The color drained from Derek's face so fast I thought he might faint. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. That guilty expression told me everything I needed to know, even more than Vanessa's confession had. Marcus, I don't know what she told you, but don't you dare try to spin this. I have DNA tests proving none of those kids are mine. I know they're yours. Derek, what I want to know is how long you've been stabbing me in the back while pretending to be my friend. He couldn't meet my eyes, just stared at the table, his jaw working, his hands gripping his beer glass like a lifeline. Since before the wedding, he finally whispered, I'm sorry, Marcus. I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. I fell in love with her, and I didn't know how to stop, and I held up my hand. I don't want your excuses. I don't want your apology. I just wanted to look you in the eye and let you know that I know. 22 years of friendship, Derek, and this is who you really are. I stood up, threw a 20 on the table for the beers I'd never touch, and looked down at the man who used to be my best friend. We're done. Don't call me. Don't text me. Don't come to my house. If I see you anywhere near my kids, I'll break every bone in your body. Marcus, please. But I was already walking away. I heard him call my name twice more, heard the desperation in his voice, and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. Let him sit there alone with what he'd done. Let him feel even a fraction of the emptiness I was carrying. But confronting them wasn't enough. I needed to understand the full scope of their betrayal. I needed to know just how deep this rabbit hole went. And what I discovered over the next few weeks would make everything I thought I knew look like the tip of a very ugly iceberg.